The dust cloud rising from the stagecoach wheels seemed to mirror the turmoil in Clara Reynolds' heart as the vehicle rattled toward Abilene, Kansas, in the scorching summer of 1875. She pressed her gloved hand against the worn leather seat, steadying herself as the coach lurched over another rut in the road, her mind racing with fears of what awaited her at journey's end. The advertisement had been clear enough. A rancher seeking a wife. No frills or flowery language, just plain facts about needing someone capable and strong. But Clara knew the one fact that mattered most had been deliberately omitted from her reply. She touched the scarred side of her face through her heavy veil, feeling the raised tissue that ran from her temple to her jaw, the permanent reminder of the fire that had taken her family's farmhouse 3 years prior. Men had recoiled from her before, their initial interest vanishing the moment they saw what the flames had left behind, and she had no reason to believe this cowboy would be any different. The stagecoach driver called out that they were approaching town, and Clara's stomach clenched. She had sold everything she owned for this ticket. This one desperate chance at a new life far from the pitying stares and whispered comments of her Missouri hometown. If Jacob Anderson rejected her, she would have nowhere to go, no money to return home, nothing but the small trunk of belongings beside her and the crushing weight of yet another failure. The main street of Abilene stretched before them, a collection of weather-beaten buildings flanking a wide dirt road that kicked up dust devils in the afternoon breeze. Clara could see the general store, the saloon, the bank, and various other establishments that marked a thriving cattle town. Cowboys lounged on porches, their hats pulled low against the sun, while women in bonnets hurried past with baskets on their arms. It was both foreign and familiar, a place that could become home or just another stop on a journey with no clear destination. The coach pulled to a halt outside the small depot, and the driver climbed down to help Clara with her trunk. She paid him the last of her coins as a tip, her hands trembling slightly as she handed over the money. She stood on the wooden walkway, surrounded by strangers, searching the faces of the men nearby for someone who might be looking for a mail-order bride. A tall figure separated himself from the shadow of the depot building, and Clara's breath caught. He was lean and sun-bronzed, with dark hair that touched his collar and eyes the color of river stones beneath his wide-brimmed hat. His clothing was practical, worn denim and a blue cotton shirt, boots that had seen plenty of use, and a leather vest that had been mended more than once. He removed his hat as he approached, revealing a strong, featured face that was neither classically handsome nor plain, but something earnest and real. "Miss Reynolds." His voice was deep and careful, as though he were gentling a skittish horse. "Yes." The word came out barely above a whisper. Clara forced herself to stand straighter to not shrink under his gaze. "You must be Mr. Anderson." "Jacob, please, I am not much for formalities." He gestured toward her trunk. "May I?" she nodded, unable to speak past the fear closing her throat. He hefted the trunk easily, muscles flexing beneath his shirt, and started toward a wagon parked nearby. Clara followed, acutely aware of the veil that still covered her face, the barrier between the moment and the inevitable disappointment. He loaded the trunk into the wagon bed with practiced efficiency, then turned to help her up to the seat. His hand was calloused but gentle as it steadied her elbow, and she settled onto the wooden bench, arranging her skirts around her. Jacob climbed up beside her, taking the reins with easy familiarity. "The ranch is about 5 miles outside town," he said, clicking his tongue to set the horses moving. "It is not fancy, but it is mine, free and clear. I have about 200 head of cattle, some horses, chickens, a good well, and a house that needs a woman's touch." Clara nodded, her throat too tight to respond. She could feel him glancing at her from the corner of his eye, curiosity evident in the set of his shoulders. The veil would seem strange to him, she knew. Most women did not wear such heavy coverings in the summer heat. "I appreciate your honesty in your letters," Jacob continued, his voice steady as the wagon wheels creaked along the rutted road. "You were straightforward about your situation, losing your family, having no prospects in your hometown. That takes courage." "I was not entirely honest," Clara said, the words bursting out before she could stop them. Better to have this over with now, before they reached his ranch, before she allowed herself even a moment of hope. "There is something I did not tell you." Jacob pulled the horses to a gentle stop at the side of the road. He turned to face her fully, his expression open and patient. "All right." Her hands shook as she reached for the pins holding her veil in place. She had rehearsed this moment 100 times in her mind, imagined all the ways it could go wrong, steeled herself for the inevitable rejection. But now that the moment was here, she found herself paralyzed with fear. "Take your time," Jacob said softly. "We have got nothing but time." Something in his voice, the genuine kindness there, gave her the courage she needed. Clara removed the pins and lifted the veil, revealing her face to the harsh sunlight and his scrutiny. She forced herself to look at him, to witness the moment his expression changed, the moment disgust or pity flooded his features. Jacob was quiet for a long moment, his gaze taking in the scarred tissue that marred the left side of her face. Clara's heart hammered so loudly she was certain he could hear it. She watched him carefully, waiting for the excuses to start, the gentle but firm suggestion that perhaps this arrangement would not work after all. "The fire that took your family," he said finally. "It marked you." "Yes." Clara's voice was barely audible. "I understand if you want to take me back to town. I should have told you in my letters, but I was afraid you would not even agree to meet me if you knew." Jacob reached up slowly, giving her time to pull away, and gently touched the edge of the scarred tissue with his fingertips. His touch was feather-light, clinical almost, as though he were simply examining an injury. Then he dropped his hand and met her eyes directly. "You survived something that killed others. You carry the proof of your strength right there on your face. Why would I reject that?" Clara stared at him, certain she had misheard. "I am scarred, disfigured. Men have turned away from me for far less." "Then those men were fools." Jacob picked up the reins again, his jaw set with quiet determination. "I did not ask for a pretty face, Miss Reynolds. I asked for a capable woman who could handle the hardships of ranch life. I asked for someone honest and strong. Seems to me you are exactly what I was looking for." Tears burned behind Clara's eyes, but she blinked them back fiercely. She had cried enough tears over her scars, over the life that had been stolen from her along with her family. "You mean that?" "I do not say things I do not mean." He glanced at her again, and this time there was the hint of a smile at the corner of his mouth. "Though I will say, your eyes are even prettier than I imagined from your letters. That is just a bonus." A startled laugh escaped Clara's throat, surprising them both. She had not laughed freely in so long that the sound seemed foreign in her own ears. Jacob's smile widened slightly, and he urged the horses back into motion. They rode in comfortable silence for a while, the landscape opening up into rolling grasslands dotted with cattle. Clara found herself relaxing incrementally, the knot of tension in her shoulders beginning to loosen. She studied Jacob from the corner of her eye, this man who had looked at her ruined face and seen strength instead of ugliness. "Tell me about your ranch," she said finally, surprising herself with the steadiness of her voice. Jacob's entire demeanor changed, enthusiasm lighting his features in a way that made him almost boyish despite the weathering of sun and wind. "I bought the land 4 years ago," right after I finished a long cattle drive up from Texas. Saved every penny I earned working for other men, and when I had enough, I found this piece of property that nobody else wanted because the previous owner had let it go to ruin. Spent the first year just making the house livable and getting the fences mended. Started with 20 head of cattle and built from there. That must have been difficult doing it all alone. It was, but I am used to solitary work. Grew up on a ranch down in Texas, learned everything from my father before he passed. My mother followed him not long after. No siblings, no other family to speak of. I came to Kansas looking for a fresh start, same as a lot of folks. Clara recognized the loneliness in his words, the same hollow ache she carried in her own chest. Your letters mentioned needing help with the ranch work. That is part of it, Jacob admitted. But mostly, I was tired of coming home to an empty house every night. Tired of eating meals alone and having no one to talk to except the horses. A man can only have so many conversations with livestock before he starts to question his sanity. Another laugh escaped Clara, this one easier than the first. I imagine the horses are not the best conversationalists. They are terrible at it, honestly. Never laugh at my jokes. The ranch came into view as they crested a small rise, and Clara felt her breath catch for an entirely different reason. The house was small but sturdy, built of good timber with a covered porch that wrapped around the front and one side. The barn was larger, freshly painted red, with a corral beside it where several horses stood watching their approach. She could see the chicken coop, a vegetable garden that was struggling but surviving, and beyond it all the vast expanse of grassland where cattle grazed peacefully. It is beautiful, Clara breathed. Jacob looked pleased. It is home, or at least I hope it will be your home too. He pulled the wagon up to the house and hopped down, coming around to help Clara descend. This time, when his hands circled her waist to lift her down, she did not flinch away. Her boots touched the ground, and she found herself standing very close to him, close enough to see the flecks of green in his gray eyes, close enough to smell the clean scent of soap and leather. I know this is sudden, Jacob said, his voice low and serious. We barely know each other beyond letters, but I meant what I said in my last correspondence. I would like to marry you, Clara Reynolds, if you are willing. We can take time to get to know each other properly first, if that is what you prefer. You can have your own room, your own space. No pressure, no expectations beyond companionship and partnership. Clara's heart was racing again, but this time it was not from fear. She looked up at this man who had seen her greatest shame and called it strength, who had looked past the surface to the person beneath. She thought of the empty years stretching behind her, the loneliness that had become her constant companion, the certainty that she would never have this chance again. I am willing, she said. I did not come all this way to turn back now. The smile that spread across Jacob's face was like sunrise, warm and full of promise. Then, let me show you inside. He retrieved her trunk from the wagon bed and carried it up the porch steps. The door swung open on well-oiled hinges, revealing a large main room that served as both kitchen and living area. The furniture was simple but well made. A table with 4 chairs, a rocking chair near the stone fireplace, shelves lined with books and supplies. Everything was tidy but sparse, clearly the domain of a man living alone. Your room is through here, Jacob said, leading her to a door on the right side of the main room. He pushed it open to reveal a small but pleasant bedroom with a real bedstead, a dresser, and a window that looked out over the vegetable garden. He set her trunk at the foot of the bed. I know it is not much, but the mattress is new, and you can decorate however you like. It is perfect, Clara said honestly. After years of sleeping in her aunt's cramped attic back in Missouri, this space felt like a palace. "Thank you. My room is on the other side past the kitchen. There is an outhouse about 50 yards behind the barn, though I have been thinking about adding a small washroom to the back of the house. Just have not gotten around to it yet." He stood awkwardly in the doorway, clearly uncertain of the protocol for this strange situation. "Are you hungry? I could make some supper." "I can cook," Clara said quickly. "If you show me where things are, I would be happy to make us both a meal. You have been working all day, I imagine." Jacob looked relieved. "That would be wonderful. I am not the worst cook, but I am far from the best. Been living on beans and bacon more often than not." They moved back to the main room, and Jacob showed her the pantry, the root cellar access, where he kept the dishes and utensils. Clara was pleased to see he had a good supply of staples: flour and sugar and coffee, dried beans and preserved vegetables. She could work with this. "I need to go check on the horses and make sure everything is settled for the night," Jacob said. "Will you be all right here alone for a bit?" "Of course. Take your time." After he left, Clara stood in the center of the kitchen, letting the reality of her situation sink in. She was here in Kansas, in the home of a man she had just met, about to become his wife. It should have terrified her, but instead she felt something unfamiliar stirring in her chest. Hope, perhaps, or the beginning of peace. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work, finding a chicken already plucked and ready in the cold box, potatoes in the root cellar, carrots from the garden. Her hands moved with practiced efficiency, preparing a proper meal while her mind wandered over the events of the afternoon. Jacob's face when she had removed her veil played over and over in her memory. The way he had touched her scars with such gentleness, the absolute sincerity in his voice when he said she was exactly what he was looking for. The door opened just as she was setting the chicken in the oven, and Jacob stepped inside, bringing with him the scent of hay and horses. He stopped short when he saw the table set with plates and silverware, the potatoes boiling on the stove, the coffee brewing in the pot. "It already looks more like a home than it has in 4 years," he said quietly. Clara felt heat rise in her unscarred cheek. "It is just supper." "It is more than that." He crossed to the sink to wash his hands, using the pitcher of water and basin set up for that purpose. "Do we have time before the meal is ready? There is something I want to give you." "Curious." Clara nodded. Jacob disappeared into his room and returned a moment later with a small wooden box. He set it on the table and opened it carefully, revealing a ring nestled on a piece of worn velvet. It was simple, a thin gold band with a small diamond that caught the lamplight. "It was my mother's," Jacob said. "The only thing of value my father ever gave her, and the only thing I kept when they passed. I would be honored if you would wear it." Clara's breath caught in her throat. She reached out with trembling fingers, touching the delicate band. "Jacob, I cannot. It is too precious, too much of a family heirloom to give to a stranger." "You are not a stranger. You are going to be my wife." He took the ring from the box and held it up. "May I?" Unable to speak, Clara extended her left hand. Jacob slipped the ring onto her finger, and it fit as though it had been made for her. She stared at it, this symbol of commitment and promise, and felt tears threatening again. "We should go into town tomorrow and find the preacher," Jacob said. "That is, if you are still willing." "I am willing." Clara looked up at him, this kind man who was offering her everything she thought she had lost. More than willing. They ate supper together as the sun set beyond the windows, painting the Kansas sky in shades of orange and pink. The meal was simple but hearty, and Jacob praised every bite with such enthusiasm that Clara found herself laughing again, that rusty sound growing easier each time. "Tell me about yourself," Jacob said as they cleared the dishes together. I know the basic facts from your letters, but I want to know the real Clara Reynolds. What do you love? What makes you happy?" Clara paused, soap suds dripping from her hands as she considered the question. No one had asked her that in years, too concerned with her tragedy or her scars to care about her as a person. "I love reading. Before the fire, I was saving to buy new books, though I rarely had time to read them with all the farm work. I love the smell of bread baking and the sound of rain on a tin roof. I love horses, though I have not ridden in years. And I love gardening, watching things grow from seeds into something beautiful and useful." "There are books here," Jacob said, gesturing to the shelves. "Not many and probably not very exciting, but you are welcome to read anything you like. As for horses, I have a mare that would be perfect for you. Gentle as a lamb but with enough spirit to make riding interesting. And the garden, well, you saw it needs work. It would be all yours if you wanted it." "I would love that." Clara dried the last dish and set it on the shelf. "What about you? What makes Jacob Anderson happy?" He leaned against the counter, considering. "Honest work that leaves me tired at the end of the day. Good coffee in the morning. Watching the cattle grow strong and healthy. The sound of coyotes singing at night, strange as that might sound. And lately, the thought of not being alone anymore." Their eyes met across the small kitchen, and something passed between them, an understanding that went deeper than words. They were both lonely souls who had found each other against all odds, two people society had overlooked or pitied, coming together to build something new. "I should let you get some rest," Jacob said finally. "Tomorrow will be a long day if we are going into town." Clara nodded, suddenly feeling the exhaustion of travel catching up with her. "Thank you, Jacob, for everything, for not turning away. Thank you for coming all this way, for taking a chance on a lonely cowboy with more dreams than sense." He smiled, that warm expression that seemed to light him from within. "Sleep well, Clara." She retreated to her room and changed into her nightgown, the ring feeling strange and wonderful on her finger. Through the wall, she could hear Jacob moving around in his own room, the creak of floorboards and the rustle of fabric. She lay in the unfamiliar bed, staring up at the ceiling, and realized she was smiling. The morning came early on the ranch, and Clara woke to the sound of Jacob moving around in the kitchen. She dressed quickly in her best dress, a dark blue cotton that brought out her eyes, and joined him to find coffee already made and bacon sizzling in a pan. "Good morning," Jacob said, looking pleased to see her. "I was going to let you sleep, but I am glad you are up. We should leave soon if we want to catch the preacher before he gets busy with other duties." They ate a quick breakfast and Jacob hitched up the wagon again. The ride into town was companionable, both of them more relaxed than they had been the day before. Clara found herself watching the landscape with new eyes, seeing it as her home now rather than a strange and foreign place. Abilene was busier in the morning, with wagons rolling down the main street and shops opening their doors. Jacob parked near the small white church at the end of town and helped Clara down. Her heart was racing again, but this time with anticipation rather than fear. The preacher was a kindly older man with wire-rimmed spectacles and a gentle smile. He listened to their request, asked them a few questions to ensure they were both entering the marriage of their own free will, and then agreed to perform the ceremony right there in the church. "Do you have witnesses?" the preacher asked. Jacob looked uncertain. "I did not think to arrange any. I will fetch my wife and we can pull someone else from the street if needed. Give me just a moment." The preacher hurried out, leaving Clara and Jacob standing awkwardly in the small sanctuary. "Are you nervous?" Jacob asked. "Terrified," Clara admitted, "but in a good way, I think." He took her hand, his thumb brushing over the ring on her finger. "Me too." The preacher returned with his wife, a plump woman with rosy cheeks, and a young clerk from the general store who had been passing by. They formed a small circle near the altar, and the preacher opened his worn Bible. The ceremony was simple and quick, the traditional words that had bound countless couples together. Jacob's voice was steady as he made his vows, his eyes never leaving Clara's face. When it was her turn, Clara found her own voice was stronger than she expected, the promises flowing from her lips with conviction. "I now pronounce you man and wife. You may kiss your bride." Jacob hesitated, clearly uncertain, but Clara made the decision for both of them. She rose on her toes and pressed a gentle kiss to his lips, brief and chaste but full of promise. His arms came around her instinctively, holding her close for just a moment before they stepped apart. They signed the marriage certificate with the preacher's wife and the store clerk as witnesses, making it all legal and binding. Jacob paid the preacher, and they walked out of the church as husband and wife, the morning sun bright overhead. "Well, Mrs. Anderson," Jacob said, trying out the name. "What would you like to do now? We could look around town, get you some things you might need for the house." "I would like that," Clara said, surprised by how natural it felt to be called by his name. They spent the next few hours exploring Abilene together. Jacob introduced her to the owners of the general store, a friendly couple named Martha and Henry Patterson who welcomed Clara warmly and did not even blink at her scars. They purchased fabric for new curtains, seeds for the garden, and a few books Clara had been longing to read. At the dressmaker's shop, Jacob insisted on ordering Clara 2 new dresses, despite her protests about the expense. "You are my wife now," he said firmly but gently. "Let me provide for you properly." By the time they loaded the wagon and headed back to the ranch, the sun was past its zenith. Clara felt exhausted but happy, surrounded by parcels and packages, evidence of her new life taking shape. That night, after another meal shared in the warm kitchen, they sat on the porch together, watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast Kansas sky. Jacob had brought out his guitar, an instrument Clara had not known he possessed, and he played soft melodies that drifted across the grassland. "My father taught me," he explained when Clara complimented his playing. "Said every man should know how to make music because life is hard enough without beauty in it." He sounds like he was a wise man. He was, tough as leather but with a soft heart underneath. My mother was the same way. I think that is why they worked so well together. They balanced each other out. Clara leaned back in her chair, feeling more content than she had in years. What was it like growing up on a ranch? Jacob's fingers continued to move over the guitar strings as he talked, telling stories of his childhood, of cattle drives and roundups, of learning to rope and ride before he could barely walk. He spoke of the hard times too, the droughts and the harsh winters, the loss of livestock and the constant struggle to keep the ranch running. "But through it all, my parents had each other," he said. "That made even the worst times bearable. That is what I want, Clara, a partnership. Someone to share both the joys and the burdens." "That is what I want too," Clara said softly. "I watched my parents work side by side every day until the fire. They were true partners in every sense. I always hope to find that for myself someday. Then we are on the same page." Jacob set the guitar aside and turned to look at her. "I know this is all happening fast and we still have a lot to learn about each other, but I want you to know I am committed to making this work, to making you happy. I am committed too." Clara met his gaze steadily. "You have given me a second chance at life, Jacob. A chance I never thought I would have. I will not take that for granted." He reached over and took her hand, their fingers intertwining naturally. They sat like that for a long while, listening to the night sounds of the prairie, the distant call of coyotes and the rustle of wind through the grass. It was peaceful in a way Clara had not experienced since before the fire, a deep settling in her soul that felt like coming home. The days that followed fell into a comfortable rhythm. Clara woke early each morning to make breakfast while Jacob handled the first round of chores, feeding the horses and chickens, checking on the cattle. They ate together, talking about their plans for the day, and then Clara would tackle the housework while Jacob worked the ranch. She threw herself into improving the home, sewing the new curtains that brought color and warmth to the windows, scrubbing every surface until it gleamed, organizing the pantry and cupboards with an efficiency that came from years of managing a household. The garden became her special project, and she spent hours working in the soil, planting the new seeds they had purchased, nurturing the struggling plants back to health. Jacob was endlessly supportive, praising every improvement and offering help whenever she needed it. He built her a proper clothesline, repaired the pump at the sink so it worked more smoothly, and surprised her one afternoon by presenting her with a rocking chair he had made specifically for her, sized to fit her smaller frame perfectly. "I noticed you always took the straight-back chair instead of my rocker," he explained, looking almost bashful. "Thought you should have one of your own." Clara ran her hands over the smooth wood, amazed by the craftsmanship. "Jacob, this is beautiful. You made this." "My father taught me woodworking along with everything else. I am a bit rusty, but it came back to me." She sat in the chair, rocking gently, and found it fit her perfectly. "Thank you. This is the most thoughtful gift anyone has ever given me." As the weeks passed, Clara found herself falling into an easy companionship with her husband. They talked about everything and nothing, sharing stories from their pasts, their hopes for the future, their observations about the daily workings of the ranch. Jacob taught her to ride the gentle mare he had promised, a sweet-tempered horse named Daisy who carried Clara across the grasslands with patient care. In turn, Clara shared her love of books with Jacob, reading aloud to him in the evenings while he worked on various projects or simply listened. They discovered they had similar tastes, both enjoying adventure stories and tales of far-off places, though Jacob confessed he had a secret fondness for poetry that he had never admitted to anyone before. "It seems unmanly," he said, looking embarrassed. "It seems human," Clara corrected. "Beauty speaks to everyone, regardless of gender." Slowly, imperceptibly at first, their relationship began to shift from companionship to something deeper. Clara caught herself watching Jacob when he was not looking, admiring the way he moved with unconscious grace, the strength in his hands as he worked, the kindness in his eyes when he looked at her. She noticed how he always made sure she was comfortable, how he listened intently when she spoke, how his face lit up when she entered a room. One evening, about 6 weeks after their wedding, they were sitting on the porch as had become their custom. Jacob was playing his guitar and Clara was mending one of his shirts. He finished a song and set the instrument aside, his expression thoughtful. "Clara, can I ask you something?" She looked up from her sewing. "Of course. Are you happy here? Truly happy?" The question surprised her, but she answered honestly. "I am happier than I have been in years. Why do you ask?" "I just want to make sure. I know this life is not easy and you gave up everything you knew to come here. I want you to feel like this is really your home, not just a place you ended up." Clara set aside her mending and moved to kneel beside his chair, taking his hands in hers. "Jacob, look at me. This is not just a place I ended up. This is the home I chose. You are the man I chose. Every day I wake up grateful that you saw past my scars to the person underneath. Grateful that you took a chance on me. I am the one who should be grateful. You brought life back to this place, to me. I did not realize how much I was just existing until you arrived and reminded me what it means to actually live." Their faces were close now, and Clara could feel the warmth of his breath. Her heart was pounding, but this time it was not from fear. Without thinking, she leaned forward and kissed him, properly this time, not the chaste peck from their wedding day. Jacob responded immediately, his arms coming around her to pull her close, his lips moving against hers with a tenderness that made her heart ache. When they finally pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Jacob rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. "I am falling in love with you, Clara Anderson. I probably have been since the moment you had the courage to remove that veil and show me who you really are." Tears spilled down Clara's cheeks, but they were tears of joy. "I am falling in love with you too. I think I started when you touched my scars and called them beautiful." "I never said beautiful," Jacob corrected gently, brushing away her tears with his thumbs. "I said they were proof of your strength. Though now that I think about it, they are beautiful too. They are part of you, and everything about you is beautiful to me." They stayed like that for a long moment, wrapped in each other's arms, and Clara felt the last of her walls crumble. She had been so certain that her scars had ruined any chance of love, of a real marriage, of happiness. But here was this remarkable man proving her wrong in every possible way. That night, Jacob walked her to her bedroom door as he always did, but this time Clara turned to him with her heart in her eyes. "You do not have to sleep alone," she said softly, "unless that is what you want." "That is not what I want at all," Jacob replied, his voice rough with emotion. "But I did not want to presume." "You are not presuming. You are my husband. I want this to be a real marriage in every way." He kissed her again, deeper this time, and she felt herself melting against him. They moved into her room together, closing the door behind them, and for the first time since the fire, Clara felt truly whole. The summer deepened into autumn, and the ranch thrived under their combined efforts. The garden produced abundantly, and Clara spent long days preserving vegetables and fruits for the winter. Jacob hired a few temporary hands to help with moving the cattle to better grazing, and Clara found herself cooking for a small crew, enjoying the bustle and energy of having others around. The ranch hands were respectful and kind, never mentioning her scars beyond the initial moment of surprise. One of them, a young man named Tommy who could not have been more than 20, was particularly shy around her, blushing whenever she spoke to him. Jacob found it amusing, teasing Tommy good-naturedly about being intimidated by a woman half his size. "She is just so capable," Tommy protested one day at lunch. "My mother was never that organized. Mrs. Anderson manages everything so smoothly." "That is because my wife is extraordinary," Jacob said, reaching over to squeeze Clara's hand. "I am a very lucky man." The open affection between them had grown steadily over the months, and now they were comfortable showing it even in front of others. Clara loved the easy way Jacob touched her, a hand on her back as he passed, fingers brushing through her hair, stolen kisses when no one was looking. She reciprocated eagerly, finding joy in small gestures of affection that had been absent from her life for so long. In October, Jacob had to make a trip to Dodge City to negotiate the sale of some of his cattle. It would be the first time they had been apart since their wedding, and neither was happy about it. "It is only 3 days," Jacob said as he packed his saddlebags the night before his departure. "4 at most. Will you be all right here alone?" "I will be fine," Clara assured him, though the thought of the empty house made her stomach clench. "I have plenty to keep me busy, and the nearest neighbors are only 2 miles away if I need anything. Still, I do not like leaving you. And I do not like you going, but the sale is important for the ranch. We need the income to get through winter comfortably." Jacob pulled her into his arms, holding her tight. "I am going to miss you every second I am gone. Then you had better hurry back to me." He left before dawn the next morning, kissing her goodbye with such intensity that Clara felt breathless. She stood on the porch watching until he disappeared over the horizon, then turned to face the day alone. The first day was not so bad. Clara threw herself into work, cleaning the already clean house, working in the garden, tending the chickens and horses. But the evening was harder, eating supper alone at the table they always shared, the empty chair across from her a painful reminder of Jacob's absence. She tried reading but could not concentrate. She tried sewing but found her hands too restless. Finally, she took her new rocking chair out to the porch and sat watching the stars, thinking about how much her life had changed in just a few short months. The second day was worse. Clara woke from dreams of the fire, something that had not happened in weeks. She went through her chores mechanically, jumping at every sound, seeing threats in every shadow. By evening, she was exhausted and on edge, missing Jacob with an intensity that surprised her. She was preparing a simple supper when she heard horses approaching. Her heart leapt, thinking Jacob had returned early, but when she looked out the window, she saw 3 riders she did not recognize. They were rough-looking men, unshaven and travel-worn, and something about the way they were looking at the house made her uneasy. Clara quickly locked the door and made sure the rifle Jacob had shown her how to use was loaded and within reach. The men dismounted, and one knocked heavily on the door. "Hello in there. We are just passing through, looking for a place to rest for the night. Saw your lights and hoped for some hospitality." Clara moved closer to the door but did not open it. "My husband is not home right now. You should try the next ranch over, the Johnsons. They are just 2 miles east." "That is a long ride for tired men," another voice called out. "We are not asking for much, just a place to sleep in the barn and maybe some hot food. I cannot help you. Please leave." There was a long silence and Clara held her breath. Then she heard low voices conferring, words she could not quite make out. Her hand tightened on the rifle. "Listen here," the first man said, his voice harder now. "We know you are alone in there, saw your husband riding out yesterday. Now you can be neighborly and open this door, or we can make things difficult." Fear shot through Clara, but beneath it was a core of steel forged in the fire that had already taken so much from her. She raised her voice, making it carry. "I am armed, and I know how to shoot. The law in Abilene knows my husband, and if anything happens here, they will hunt you down. Your best choice is to leave now." "A woman alone does not scare us," the man said, and she heard footsteps moving around the side of the house, testing windows. Clara fired a shot through the ceiling, the blast deafening in the small house. That was a warning. The next one will not be. The footsteps stopped. After a tense moment, she heard the men mounting up, grumbling among themselves. She watched through the window as they rode away, heading south rather than east toward the Johnsons. Only when they were completely out of sight did she allow herself to start shaking. She did not sleep that night, sitting in her rocking chair with the rifle across her lap, starting at every sound. The house that had felt like a haven now felt isolated and vulnerable. She thought of Jacob and wished desperately that he was there. Dawn came finally, and with it a rider approaching fast. Clara grabbed the rifle, her heart pounding, but then recognized Jacob's horse. He pulled up in a cloud of dust and was off the animal before it had fully stopped, taking the porch steps in 2 bounds. "Clara, I saw the tracks, the signs of multiple horses. What happened?" She flew into his arms, the rifle clattering to the porch floor, and he held her tight while she told him everything. His jaw grew tighter with each word, his arms almost painfully strong around her. "I should never have left you," he said when she finished. "If anything had happened to you. But nothing did. I handled it." He pulled back to look at her, his eyes searching her face. "You did. You were incredibly brave, but that does not make it any less my fault for leaving you unprotected. You could not have known, and I am fine, truly, just tired and glad you are home." Jacob did not leave her side for the rest of the day, only going out to tend the animals when absolutely necessary. That night, as they lay in bed together, he held her close. "I completed the sale in 1 day instead of 3, he said. "I could not stand being away from you. Is that foolish?" "No," Clara whispered, "because I felt the same way. These 2 days felt like a year. Then we are both fools, but happy fools." He kissed her temple, her cheek, her lips. "I love you, Clara, more than I thought it possible to love another person. I love you too. So much it sometimes frightens me." "Do not be frightened. This is the good kind of feeling, the kind worth holding on to." Winter arrived early that year, sweeping down from the north with icy winds and heavy snow. Jacob and Clara spent long hours preparing, bringing in firewood, ensuring the animals had adequate shelter, stocking the pantry. When the first real blizzard hit in late November, they were as ready as they could be. Being snowbound meant long days together in the warm house, and Clara discovered she loved this enforced intimacy. They cooked together, read together, talked for hours about everything and nothing. Jacob taught her to play the guitar, his hands guiding hers on the strings, and she taught him the elaborate card games her mother had loved. One evening, as they sat by the fire, Clara felt a familiar sensation low in her belly. She had been noticing changes in her body for a few weeks now, the tenderness, the fatigue, the way certain smells made her feel queasy. She had been waiting to be sure before saying anything, but now she knew. "Jacob," she said softly, "I have something to tell you." He looked up from the saddle he was mending, immediately alert to the serious tone in her voice. "What is it? Are you all right?" "I am more than all right. I am pregnant." For a moment Jacob just stared at her, the saddle forgotten in his lap. Then a grin spread across his face, wider than any she had ever seen. He set the saddle aside and crossed to her, kneeling before her chair and taking her hands. "Are you certain?" "As certain as I can be without seeing a doctor. All the signs are there. We are going to have a baby." His voice was full of wonder. "Clara, we are going to be parents." Tears filled her eyes as she nodded, and he pulled her into his arms, laughing and crying at the same time. They held each other as the fire crackled and the wind howled outside, wrapped in their own perfect moment of joy. "When do you think?" Jacob asked, his hand coming to rest gently on her still flat stomach. "Late spring, if my calculations are right. Maybe early June. We will need to prepare. Make sure we have everything the baby will need, and you will need to be careful, not work too hard." "Jacob, women have babies all the time while doing ranch work. I will be fine." "I know, but you are not just any woman. You are my woman, and I am going to take care of you both." True to his word, Jacob became almost overprotective as the pregnancy progressed. He insisted on doing all the heavy work around the house, would not let Clara lift anything heavier than a skillet, and worried constantly about her well-being. It was both touching and occasionally irritating, but Clara knew it came from a place of deep love, so she bore it with as much grace as she could muster. The winter eventually gave way to spring, and with the warming weather came new life on the ranch. Calves were born, foals dropped, and the garden began to sprout. Clara's belly grew round and full, and she felt the baby moving inside her with increasing frequency. Each kick, each flutter, filled her with an awe she had never experienced before. Jacob took to talking to her belly each night, telling the baby stories about the ranch, singing soft songs, making promises about the life they would all share together. Clara would run her fingers through his hair as he did this, her heart so full of love she thought it might burst. In early May, Martha Patterson from the general store came out to check on Clara, bringing with her experience from helping deliver babies in the area. She pronounced Clara healthy and predicted the baby would come within the next few weeks. "Do you want to know if I can guess whether it is a boy or a girl?" Martha asked, her hands on Clara's belly. Clara and Jacob looked at each other. "We would like to be surprised," Clara said. "As long as the baby is healthy, that is all that matters." A wise attitude, Martha approved. She left them with instructions and advice, promising to come back when the time grew closer. The baby decided to arrive during a thunderstorm on a warm June night. Clara woke to contractions and the sound of rain pounding on the roof, immediately knowing this was it. She shook Jacob awake, and he sprang into action, his earlier fussing replaced by calm efficiency. He could not leave her to fetch Martha with the storm raging, so they prepared to do this alone. Jacob built up the fire, boiled water, gathered clean linens, all while keeping Clara comfortable and encouraged. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the next morning, but Jacob never left her side, holding her hand, wiping her face with cool cloths, telling her how strong she was, how proud he was of her. Finally, as the storm cleared and the morning sun broke through the clouds, their son was born. He came into the world with a lusty cry that made both parents laugh through their tears. Jacob cut the cord with shaking hands and helped Clara clean the baby before placing him in her arms. "He is perfect," Clara breathed, staring down at the tiny red face, the shock of dark hair, the small fists waving in the air. "Absolutely perfect." "He looks like you," Jacob said, his voice thick with emotion. "He looks like us both." They named him James, after Jacob's father, and he became the center of their world. Jacob was a devoted father, taking on even more of the household work so Clara could rest and recover, walking the floor with James when he was fussy, changing diapers without complaint. Watching him with their son made Clara fall in love with him all over again. As James grew from a tiny newborn into a chubby, smiling baby, the ranch continued to prosper. Jacob hired a permanent hand, a reliable older man named Samuel who became like family. With extra help, Jacob could spend more time with Clara and James, and the three of them would often ride out together to check on the cattle, James secure in a sling against Jacob's chest. On their first anniversary, Jacob surprised Clara with a beautiful new wedding ring to go alongside his mother's. This one was engraved with their initials and their wedding date, a symbol of the year they had spent building a life together. "I know we already have rings," he said as he slipped it onto her finger, "but I wanted to give you something that was just ours, a reminder of everything we have created together." "It is beautiful. You are beautiful." Clara kissed him softly. "This year has been the best of my life." "Thank you for choosing me." "Thank you for choosing me right back." They stood on the porch of their home, their son sleeping peacefully inside, the ranch spread out before them in all its hard-won glory. Clara thought back to the terrified woman who had arrived in Abilene expecting rejection, armored with veils and low expectations. That woman seemed like a stranger now, someone from another lifetime. Jacob had not just given her acceptance. He had given her love, partnership, a home, a family, a future brighter than anything she had dared to dream. And she had given him the same in return, two broken people who had found each other and been made whole. The years that followed were full and rich, marked by the rhythms of ranch life and the growth of their family. 2 years after James, they welcomed a daughter they named Emily, who had her mother's eyes and her father's stubborn determination. 3 years after that came another son, Michael, who was quiet and thoughtful from birth. The ranch expanded steadily, and Jacob became known throughout the region as a fair and honest rancher. Clara became beloved in the community for her kindness and practical help, always ready to assist a neighbor in need. Her scars, which had once made her an object of pity or revulsion, became simply part of who she was, barely noticed by those who knew her. On their 10th anniversary, Jacob took Clara into Abilene for a rare night alone, leaving the children with Samuel and his wife, who had moved into the small cabin Jacob had built for his hired hands. They had dinner at the hotel restaurant, and afterward, Jacob led her to the church where they had been married. "I wanted to come back here," he said, opening the door to the empty sanctuary, "to remember where it all started." They stood in the spot where they had exchanged vows, older now, marked by sun and wind and the passage of time. Clara's hair had threads of silver, and Jacob's face bore lines earned from years of smiling. But the way they looked at each other was the same, full of wonder and gratitude and deep, abiding love. "If I could go back," Jacob said, taking both her hands in his. "If I could change anything about that day, I would not. Every moment, every choice led us here. Led us to this life we have built together." "I would not change anything either," Clara agreed. "Except maybe I would have removed that veil sooner, been braver about showing you who I really was. You were plenty brave. You traveled across the country to meet a stranger, with nothing but hope and courage to sustain you. That is the definition of bravery." They renewed their vows there in the empty church, speaking the words from their hearts this time rather than from memory. They promised to continue choosing each other every day, to face whatever challenges came with the same partnership that had seen them through the first decade. The children grew, as children do, each developing their own personalities and dreams. James loved working the ranch alongside his father, already showing the same quiet competence and work ethic. Emily was fascinated by books and learning, and Clara taught her to read and write with the same dedication her own mother had shown. Michael was drawn to animals with an almost mystical connection, able to gentle even the wildest horse with patience and soft words. There were hard years mixed in with the good ones. A particularly brutal winter that decimated the herd and required every ounce of their savings and determination to recover from. An accident that left Jacob laid up for 2 months with a broken leg, forcing Clara to take on even more of the ranch work with Samuel's help. The loss of old friends and the normal pains that come with building a life. But through it all, Clara and Jacob had each other. They faced every challenge as a team, celebrated every victory together, and never forgot how lucky they were to have found each other against all odds. As the children reached their teenage years, the house was full of noise and energy and life. Friends were always coming and going, drawn by the warmth of the Anderson home and the welcoming nature of its inhabitants. Clara loved having a full table, cooking for crowds, being at the center of this loud, chaotic, wonderful family they had created. Jacob would sometimes pull her aside during these gatherings, stealing her away to the porch or the barn, just to have a moment alone. "How did we get this lucky?" he would ask, holding her close. "We took a chance on each other," Clara would remind him. "We chose to see the possibility instead of the obstacles." On their 20th anniversary, the entire community came together for a celebration at the ranch. Tables were set up in the yard, loaded with food and drink, and people laughed and danced late into the night. James, now 19 and nearly as tall as his father, gave a toast that brought tears to everyone's eyes. "My parents taught me that love is not about finding someone perfect," he said, raising his glass. "It is about finding someone who sees your imperfections and loves you anyway, who chooses you every single day. That is what real partnership looks like, and I hope I am lucky enough to find what they have." Clara and Jacob danced together under the stars, moving to the music of fiddles and guitars, surrounded by the life they had built. Clara rested her head against Jacob's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, and felt completely at peace. "You ever think about that day on the stagecoach?" Jacob asked softly. "When you were coming here, expecting me to turn you away?" "Sometimes," Clara admitted. "It seems like a lifetime ago, like it happened to someone else. I am glad you were brave enough to come anyway, even though you were scared. I am glad you were kind enough to look past the surface and see who I really was." They danced until their feet ached, and their children dragged them to sit down before they wore themselves out. Surrounded by family and friends, Clara looked at the faces of her children, the man she loved, the home they had made, and felt overwhelming gratitude for the twist of fate that had brought her to Kansas 20 years ago. The years continued to pass, marked by weddings and grandchildren, and the endless cycle of ranch life. James married a sweet-natured girl from town and built a house on the far end of the property, taking over more of the daily operations as Jacob grew older. Emily became a teacher in Abilene, marrying a lawyer who adored her sharp mind and kind heart. Michael traveled west to study veterinary medicine, returning to set up practice in town and care for the animals of the region. Clara and Jacob watched it all with pride and joy, their love deepening with each passing year into something unshakable and eternal. They were grandparents now, with a growing brood of grandchildren who filled the house with laughter and noise whenever they visited. On quiet evenings, they would sit on the porch as they had done since the beginning, Jacob playing his guitar while Clara rocked in the chair he had made her so long ago. They did not need to talk as much anymore, comfortable in the silence that comes from truly knowing another person. But sometimes Jacob would set aside the guitar and take Clara's hand, pulling her up to dance with him to music only they could hear. "I love you," he would say, as he had said countless times before. "I will always love you." "And I love you," Clara would respond, her scarred face pressed against his weathered one, two old souls who had found their perfect match in each other. As they moved into their later years, both in their 60s now, they made the decision to fully hand over the ranch to James and his family. They built a small cottage near the main house, close enough to be involved but separate enough to have their own space. Clara had taken up painting, something she had always wanted to try, and filled the cottage with landscapes of the prairie she had grown to love. Jacob spent his days woodworking, creating beautiful furniture for his children and grandchildren, each piece made with the same care he had shown in everything he did. They traveled a bit, taking the train to see the ocean, visiting Denver and Kansas City, experiencing the wider world together. But they always came home to their prairie, to the land they had tamed and nurtured, to the family they had built from nothing but love and determination. On their 50th anniversary, the family threw an enormous party that drew people from all over the region. Clara and Jacob sat in places of honor, holding hands as speaker after speaker stood to talk about the impact they had made, the lives they had touched, the example they had set. Their grandchildren performed a play they had written about how Clara and Jacob met, complete with exaggerated accents and costumes. The whole crowd roared with laughter, but there was also tenderness in the telling, a recognition of how remarkable their love story truly was. That night, after everyone had gone and they were alone in their cottage, Jacob led Clara to their bed and held her close. 50 years, he marveled. It went by in the blink of an eye. "And yet it feels like we have always been together," Clara replied. "I can barely remember what life was like before you." That scared girl on the stagecoach had no idea what she was riding toward. And that lonely cowboy had no idea the gift he was about to receive. They lay together in the darkness, their bodies fitting together perfectly after decades of practice. Clara traced the lines of Jacob's face, committing them to memory even though she knew every inch of him already. "Thank you," she whispered. "For every day, every moment, every choice that brought us here." "Thank you," Jacob echoed, "for being brave enough to trust me with your heart." They drifted off to sleep in each other's arms, and Clara dreamed of that long-ago summer day when she had stepped off the stagecoach expecting rejection. She dreamed of the man who had given her acceptance instead, who had slipped his mother's ring on her finger and promised her a partnership. She dreamed of the life they had built, brick by brick, day by day, choice by choice. When Clara woke in the morning, she turned to find Jacob already awake, watching her with the same expression of wonder he had worn on their wedding day. "Good morning, Mrs. Anderson," he said, as he had said every morning for 50 years. "Good morning, Mr. Anderson," she replied, as she always did. And as the sun rose over the Kansas prairie, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink, they began another day together. These two souls who had found each other against all odds and built a love that would last forever. The seasons continued their endless cycle, and Clara and Jacob moved through them hand in hand, facing each new day with gratitude and grace. Their cottage became a sanctuary, filled with the accumulated treasures of a life well lived. Photographs of children and grandchildren, paintings and furniture they had created, books worn soft from countless readings. The great-grandchildren started arriving, and Clara would hold these tiny new lives in her arms with amazement, seeing in their faces the legacy of love she and Jacob had created. Each child carried forward some piece of them, whether it was James' eyes or Emily's stubbornness, or Michael's gentleness, or Clara's strength, or Jacob's kindness. On a spring morning in their 75th year, Clara woke to find Jacob unusually quiet beside her. He was staring at the ceiling, his expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, snuggling closer. "Just counting my blessings," he replied, his arm coming around her, "trying to comprehend how I got so lucky." "We both got lucky. We found each other." "Best decision I ever made, putting that advertisement in the paper. Second best decision was saying yes when you stepped off that stagecoach looking terrified and determined at the same time. I was so certain you would reject me. I had convinced myself that no man would ever want me after the fire." Jacob turned to face her, his hand cupping her scarred cheek with the same tenderness he had shown 50 years ago. "Their loss was my gain. I got the strongest, bravest, most beautiful woman in the world. And I got to spend my life loving her." Tears slipped down Clara's cheeks, but they were happy tears, the kind that come from a heart too full to contain all the emotion. "I love you, Jacob Anderson. I have loved you since the day you called my scars proof of my strength. I will love you until my last breath and beyond. And I love you, Clara Anderson. You made my life worth living. You gave me everything I never knew I needed." They spent the day together, doing simple things, working in the garden, feeding the chickens, sitting on the porch watching the clouds drift by. That evening, the whole family came for Sunday supper as they did every week, and the cottage and main house were filled with noise and laughter and love. Clara looked around the table at the faces of her children, their spouses, the grandchildren, the great-grandchildren, all of them here because she had been brave enough to step off that stagecoach, because Jacob had been kind enough to look past the surface, because they had chosen each other and kept choosing each other every single day. "What are you thinking, Grandma?" Emily's oldest daughter asked, noticing Clara's faraway expression. "I am thinking how blessed we are," Clara replied. "How one choice, one moment of courage can change everything." "Tell us the story again," one of the great-grandchildren piped up, "about how you and Grandpa met." It was a story they had heard dozens of times, but Clara never tired of telling it. She told them about the long stage-coach ride, about her fear and her veil, about Jacob's kindness and the ring he had given her. She told them about the early days of their marriage, learning to work together, falling in love. Jacob added his perspective, making them all laugh with his descriptions of trying to cook for himself before Clara arrived, of the burned beans and rock-hard biscuits, of the loneliness that had been his constant companion. "And then this beautiful woman showed up and turned my whole world upside down," he said, reaching for Clara's hand across the table. "Best thing that ever happened to me." The family lingered long into the evening, reluctant to break the spell of togetherness. But eventually, the children needed to be put to bed, and people began drifting home. James was the last to leave, and he hugged both his parents tightly. "I love you both," he said. "Thank you for showing me what marriage should look like." After everyone had gone, Clara and Jacob cleaned up together, moving in the synchronized dance of people who had been partners for decades. They readied themselves for bed, and as they lay down together, Clara felt a profound sense of completeness. "No regrets?" Jacob asked softly in the darkness. "Not a single one. You. Only that I did not find you sooner. But then again, maybe we found each other at exactly the right time. We were both ready, both open to the possibility. I think you are right. If we had met earlier, we might not have appreciated what we had." They fell asleep wrapped in each other's arms, and Clara dreamed of all the years behind them, all the moments both ordinary and extraordinary that had made up their life together. The years that followed were gentle and sweet, marked by the simple pleasures of a life well lived. Clara and Jacob spent their days doing the things they loved, creating art and music, playing with their great-grandchildren, tending their garden, sitting on the porch watching the sun set over the prairie they had called home for so long. They celebrated their 60th anniversary surrounded by family, an event that drew people from all over. Cards and letters poured in from friends and neighbors, all expressing admiration for the love that had endured for 6 decades. 60 years, Clara marveled, holding the simple band Jacob had given her on their wedding day, worn thin now from decades of wear. "How is that even possible?" "It is possible when you marry your best friend," Jacob replied. "When every day is a gift you get to share together." As they moved into their 80s, both began to slow down physically, but their minds remained sharp and their love remained strong. They needed canes to walk now, moved more slowly, tired more easily. But they were always together, always supporting each other through each new limitation. One autumn afternoon, as they sat on the porch watching the leaves turn gold, Jacob suddenly turned to Clara with unusual seriousness. "Promise me something," he said. "Anything. When my time comes, do not mourn too long. Remember the joy we shared, not the pain of loss. And know that loving you was the greatest privilege of my life." Tears filled Clara's eyes. "Do not talk like that. We still have time." "I know, but I want to say it while I can. I want you to know." He took her hand, his grip still strong despite the tremor of age. "You saved me, Clara. Before you came, I was just existing, going through the motions. You taught me how to truly live." "And you saved me," Clara replied, her voice thick with emotion. "You gave me back myself when I thought the fire had taken everything. You showed me I was still worthy of love." They sat together until the sun set, holding hands, memorizing each other one more time. That winter was harsh, and Jacob caught a cold that settled deep in his chest. Despite Clara's careful nursing and the doctor's best efforts, he grew weaker. But even in illness, he remained focused on her, worried about how she would manage without him. "You are strong," he told her from his bed, his voice barely a whisper. You always have been. You will be fine." "I do not want to be fine without you," Clara said, tears streaming down her face. "I want us to grow old together, to reach 100 together." "We did grow old together, my love. Look at all we shared, all we built. Not everyone gets what we had. We are blessed beyond measure." The family gathered, knowing the end was near. Jacob had moments of clarity where he could speak to each of his children, his grandchildren, offering words of wisdom and love. But his eyes always returned to Clara, seeking her out across the room. On a clear winter night, with the stars bright overhead, Jacob took his last breath with Clara holding his hand. His last word was her name, spoken with all the love of 62 years. Clara felt the moment his spirit left, felt the profound absence of the man who had been her partner, her love, her everything. The grief that washed over her was immense, threatening to pull her under. But even in that darkest moment, she remembered his words. Remember the joy, not just the pain. The funeral was massive, attended by hundreds of people whose lives Jacob had touched. Speaker after speaker stood to talk about his kindness, his integrity, his devotion to his family. But it was Clara who gave the final eulogy, standing straight despite her grief, speaking with a voice that carried across the crowded church. "Jacob Anderson was the best man I have ever known," she said. "He was kind when the world was cruel, gentle when the world was harsh, accepting when the world turned away. He saw me at my most vulnerable and chose to love me anyway. He gave me a life I never dreamed possible, a family that is his greatest legacy. And though my heart is broken by his absence, it is also fuller than I ever imagined because of the years we shared. He taught me that love is not about finding someone perfect. It is about finding someone who chooses you every day, who stands by you through every storm, who sees the best in you even when you cannot see it yourself. That was Jacob. That was the gift he gave not just to me, but to everyone he met. And that is how he will be remembered." She placed a single red rose on his casket, the same type of flower he had brought her every week for 62 years, and said her final goodbye. The weeks that followed were the hardest of Clara's life. The cottage felt too empty, too quiet without Jacob's presence. She would wake in the night reaching for him, forgetting for a moment that he was gone, and the realization would break her heart all over again. But she was not alone in her grief. Her children surrounded her with love and support, making sure she was never truly by herself. They brought meals and company, shared their own memories of their father, helped her through the darkest days. Slowly, gradually, Clara began to heal. Not from the loss that would always be with her, but around it. She learned to carry her grief alongside her memories of joy, understanding that both were part of loving someone deeply. She started painting again, creating portraits of Jacob from memory, capturing the way he had looked at different stages of their life together. She played the guitar he had taught her on, her fingers finding the melodies he had loved. She tended the garden they had planted together, finding peace in the familiar rhythms of growth and harvest. On what would have been their 63rd anniversary, Clara visited Jacob's grave, bringing red roses and spending the afternoon talking to him as though he could hear her. "I miss you every moment of every day," she said softly, "but I am grateful for every second we had together. You gave me the greatest gift anyone could give. You saw me for who I truly was and loved me anyway. You made me believe I was worthy of love, and that belief carried me through everything." She felt a breeze stir her hair, warm and gentle, and chose to believe it was Jacob's way of letting her know he was still with her. Clara lived for 5 more years after Jacob's death, years spent surrounded by the love of her family. She became the matriarch they all turned to for wisdom and comfort, the living embodiment of the love story that had started their family. She told the story of meeting Jacob to anyone who would listen, especially the young people preparing for their own marriages. She emphasized the importance of choosing each other every day, of looking past surface imperfections to the person underneath, of building a partnership based on mutual respect and unwavering support. Love is not always easy, she would tell them. There will be hard times, moments when you question everything. But if you have chosen the right person, if you have built your relationship on a foundation of true partnership, you will weather those storms together. And the joy you find in the good times will make every challenge worthwhile. As Clara grew older and frailer, she never lost her sharp mind or her capacity for love. She greeted each new great-great-grandchild with wonder, seeing in them the continuation of the legacy she and Jacob had built. On a spring morning, much like the one when she had given birth to James so many years ago, Clara woke with a sense of peace and clarity. She was 87 years old, and she knew her time was near. She asked her children to gather, wanting to see them all one more time. They came quickly, filling her bedroom with love and warmth, and Clara looked at each face, memorizing them one final time. "I am ready," she told them. "I have had the most wonderful life, full of more love than one person deserves, but I am ready to be with your father again." "We love you, Mama," Emily said, tears streaming down her face. "And I love you all so much. Remember what your father and I showed you. Choose love every single day, be kind to each other, build something that will last." Clara smiled, her gaze turning inward as though seeing something the others could not. "He is here. I can feel him. He is waiting for me." With her children holding her hands, surrounded by the family that was her greatest achievement, Clara took her last breath. And as her spirit left her body, those present would later swear they felt a shift in the air, as though two souls long separated were finally reunited. The funeral for Clara Anderson was even larger than Jacob's had been, a testament to the impact she had made in her 87 years. The church overflowed with mourners, and people lined the streets as the procession made its way to the cemetery where Jacob waited. James gave the eulogy for his mother, his voice strong despite his grief. "My mother was the bravest person I have ever known," he said. "She came to Kansas with nothing but hope and courage, expecting rejection but finding acceptance and love instead. She and my father built something rare and precious, a true partnership, a love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. They showed all of us what marriage should be, what family should be. And though we grieve their loss, we celebrate the legacy they left behind. We are all here because of the courage of a young woman who stepped off a stagecoach 63 years ago, and the kindness of a lonely cowboy who looked past her scars to see her strength. That is love. That is the gift they gave us all." Clara was buried beside Jacob, their headstones simple but bearing an inscription that told their story. Together they built a life. Together they found love. Together forever. In the years that followed, the family continued to thrive, each generation adding to the legacy that Clara and Jacob had started. The ranch remained in the Anderson family, passed down through the generations, a testament to hard work and love. The story of how Clara and Jacob met became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. It was a reminder of courage and kindness, of looking past surface appearances to the person underneath, of the transformative power of true love. The cottage where they had spent their final years together was preserved as a family gathering place, filled with the paintings Clara had created and the furniture Jacob had built. Their grandchildren and great-grandchildren would visit it, feeling the presence of the two people who had started it all. And on quiet evenings, when the wind blew across the Kansas prairie, Some would swear they could hear the faint sound of a guitar playing and see two figures dancing together on the porch. Two souls who had found each other against all odds and whose love had proved stronger than time itself. Clara had arrived in Abilene expecting rejection, carrying the burden of her scars and her losses. But Jacob Anderson had given her acceptance, slipping his mother's ring on her finger and promising her partnership and love. Together, they had built a life that became the foundation for generations to come, a testament to the power of choosing to see past imperfections to the beauty underneath. Their love story was not one of fairy tale perfection. It was better than that. It was real, built on daily choices and unwavering commitment, forged through challenges and celebrated in triumphs. It was the kind of love that transforms not just two people, but everyone around them. And in the end, it was a love that lasted beyond death. Two souls bound together for eternity, their legacy living on in every descendant who learned from their example that true love is not about finding someone perfect, but about choosing someone perfectly imperfect and building something beautiful together. The prairie stretched on forever under the vast Kansas sky, holding within its rolling hills the story of a woman who came seeking nothing but acceptance, and the cowboy who gave her that and so much more. A home, a family, a love that would echo through the generations. It was a story of courage rewarded, kindness repaid, and two hearts that beat as one from the moment they first met until long after their final breaths. And that, in the end, was the greatest legacy of all.